Hello my friends, welcome to part 10 to my 12-part video series on Eastern hunter-gatherers from Samarskaya Oblast of Central Russia. It's this region of Russia right here. Make sure you watch the other 9 parts that I released previously, and in case you are watching this video a little bit further in time after I upload it, make sure you watch the other part 11 and part 12 as well. Just make sure you watch all the 12 parts that I release in case you are interested in exploring the results of these 12 Eastern hunter-gatherers from Samarskaya Oblast in central Russia. And all of these files, I will remind you, all of these files will be on my Google Drive where I store the ancient DNA that I analyze. Now, this particular hunter-gatherer lived 85 centuries before the Common Era, so 105 centuries before present, a very long time ago. This is the early Mesolithic period, and his ancient admixture can be best summarized as a mixture of ancient North Eurasians, Western hunter-gatherers, with a little bit of Southern admixture as well. So he actually has a little bit of Caucasian hunter-gatherer admixture on top of the ancient North Eurasian and the Western hunter-gatherer admixture that's typical for Eastern hunter-gatherers. There's a common misconception, and I've touched on that topic previously in my previous videos, but I'm going to talk about this a little bit more as well, that there is a common misconception that Eastern hunter-gatherers uniformly from Finland to Samara, Eastern hunter-gatherers are just a mixture of ancient North Eurasians plus Western hunter-gatherers of Europe. That is not the case. As you go south in Russia, especially like in this region right here where this individual is from, around the Volga River, they have some admixture from the south, from the Caucasus, and some of these samples from Sidelkino have up to 10% of Caucasian hunter-gatherer admixture. In this case, not that much, only 3.8% Caucasian admixture, but it's still present, it's still there. In terms of the haplogroups, the mitochondrial lineage for this individual is U5A2, very typical mitochondrial lineage for various European hunter-gatherers. And the paternal lineage, it is actually a male, so this is a boy. His paternal lineage is R1b, which is nowadays a very common paternal haplogroup for various Western Europeans. Now let's go ahead and get into his results with my trait predictor. First, we're going to look at his Nashakot results, so what he looks like, his phenotype. And it looks like for Nashakot, he is scoring hazel eye color as the most likely eye color for him. He's also scoring quite a high likelihood for brown eyes and green eyes and blue eyes over the neighbor center, which is definitely very interesting. So he's got very high likelihood of hazel eyes, light intermediate eye color such as green or blue eyes over the neighbor center, and brown eyes, which is definitely very interesting. So he's got some. It looks like he has some predisposition to lighter eye color. So he's lighter than most of the other Eastern hunter-gatherers from Sidelkino. They're definitely very surprising. Still darker than most Northern Europeans. Of course, hazel eyes is quite dark compared to what's typical for Northern Europe, but nonetheless, compared to other Eastern hunter-gatherers, he's rather light in terms of pigmentation. For hair color, it looks like he's scoring dark brown hair. Once again, compared to most modern inhabitants of Russia and Russians and Eastern Europeans and Northern Europeans in general, dark brown hair is rather dark. But compared to other Eastern hunter-gatherers, he is quite light. He's quite light in terms of color. So I'm definitely going to be very curious to see what he scores for various blue eye haplotypes and his genotype for SLC 24A5 and 45A2. I'm definitely going to be very curious to see that. For skin color, he's actually scoring palest skin at 56% likelihood. So he's predicted skin color is the lightest skin color you can score. So he's definitely got very pale skin. He's got dark brown hair and he's got hazel eyes. So overall, he's actually very, very light in terms of pigmentation. And by Eastern hunter-gatherer standards, he is much, much lighter than the rest of them. That's very interesting. For hair texture, he is scoring wavy or straight hair. And for nose shape, he is scoring rather snubbed and Greek-shaped nose, but the percentages are more or less equivalent. There's not that big of a discrepancy between these two percentages, 40 versus 60%. There's not that big of a difference here. Okay, for coloring related variants, so he's heterozygous here, so this means with snipper free, he's likely to score hazel. He has heterozygous genotype for blue eye haplotype 3, which is very interesting. Once again, likely to score hazel with snipper 3 as well because of that. But no light color variants and BH2. Okay, so definitely some predisposition to darker pigmentation because of this. With YSEC, he would score brown because of this one genotype. But of course, YSEC is pretty bad. And he also has heterozygous genotype in this variation of SLC45A2. So he actually, compared to most modern Northern Europeans, is very, very dark. But still, despite that, actually because of this one genotype right here in IRF4, this plays a very big contribution to pigmentation of eyes, hair, and skin. This genotype is playing a very big role in, especially in the skin color prediction, where he's scoring palest skin. It's played a very big role here, and it's very unusual as well for even for Northern Europeans to score two light color variants here. It's very unusual, very rare. But of course, it peaks in Northern Europeans, the light color variance in this variation. So he does have this one rare genotype that really predisposes him to having very pale pigmentation of skin, but also plays a big role in lightening the pigmentation of eye color as well. He also carries this one light pigmentation variant in this variation of Kittel G, and this is the variation that back in 2010 was determined to be causal for blonde hair. Of course, it doesn't really play that big of a role, but it doesn't play a very big role actually in determining hair color. But nonetheless, it is very interesting that he carries it. This variant. It is quite interesting, and he does not carry any variants for ginger hair in MC1R. Okay, so let's close that. Let's see the phenotype oracle. What phenotypes does he resemble based on this information? And the phenotypes he resembles most are number one. The closest phenotype to him looks like French. I forget the actual scientific name for it, but it looks like French. The second closest phenotype to him looks like Tatar, and the third closest phenotype to him looks like, I guess, Mediterranean. Actually, not really. It looks like Mediterranean with green eyes. And for the mixtures of phenotypes, the mixtures look very interesting. So the closest mixture looks like a mixture of French plus French. So the closest phenotype actually is just French. That's the closest to him. The second closest phenotype is a mixture of Tatar plus French. So I guess the closest mixture is just French. Then the third closest is a mixture of North Pointed plus Turanid somehow, or whatever this is called. So there seems to be a little bit of a Central Asian Central Asian admixture in this result, which is definitely very interesting. I wonder if he has any East Eurasian alleles in EDAR. Let's check that right now, actually. We can check that right now. And it looks like he does not have any East Asian variants in EDAR. Okay, very interesting. What do we have for the facial morphology oracle? We have a genotype for longer mid-face length. We have a genotype for upturned nose. We have a genotype for slightly larger nose size, and we have a genotype for thinner eyebrows. Definitely very interesting. Okay, let's go over the biomarkers results. Okay, so for the biomarkers, looks like he has a predisposition to average or slightly above average levels of vitamin D, a higher level of LDL cholesterol, which is unfortunate, below average level of HDL cholesterol, which is also bad, a higher level of glucose, which is bad, a higher level of hemoglobin, which is bad, a lower blood pressure, which is good, a higher level of iron in the blood. So it looks like he has hemochromatosis variants. Looks like he actually has the Celtic curse variants. Let's look that up in the file. Hold on. Hemochromatosis. Yes, I was correct. So he's not a carrier of the C282Y hemochromatosis mutations, and he does not carry S65C variants, but he has two copies of the H63D variants, and he likely suffers from hemochromatosis. So he actually does carry Celtic curse variants for hemochromatosis in the HFE gene. Very, very interesting. And I was able to determine this by just looking at the score in the biomarkers panel. Very, very cool. He's got average level of sex hormone binding globulin. He's got average level of red blood cell count in blood. He's got average for telomere length. And he's got slightly above average for height. Very cool. So he's slightly taller than average. Let's go ahead and look at his polygenic risk scores. What are his predispositions? I am going to ignore everything that is average. So it looks like he has above average predisposition to kidney stones. He's got below average predisposition to gout. He's got above average predisposition to eczema. He's got below average predisposition to polycystic ovary syndrome. He's got very high predisposition to age-related macular degeneration, AMD. He's got below average predisposition to myopia. He's got slightly high predisposition to male pattern hair loss, so male pattern baldness is a little bit of a risk for him, but it is a little bit of a risk for every West Eurasian, which includes Eastern hunter-gatherers. He's got slightly below average odds for bipolar. He's got slightly below average odds for schizophrenia, and slightly below average odds for type 2 diabetes, and slightly below average odds for type 1 diabetes. Also slightly below average odds for Alzheimer's, and also slightly below average odds for multiple sclerosis. So it looks like he's got pretty healthy genotype for everything except for AMD. Age-related macular degeneration is the only thing that he really has a high score for. Okay, let's see, for the cancer section, he's got 1 risk variant for breast cancer out of 10, which is pretty typical. He's got 10 risk variants for testicular cancer out of 12, which is really, really bad. And he actually has 2 risk variants for the important variants in keto G. So he's quite cooked when it comes to risk for testicular cancer. Quite cooked. But once again, I think testicular cancer is something that was really a big concern. Wasn't really a big concern until the modern period. So once again, probably was not a big deal in the Mesolithic period. Celiac disease, no risk variants for that. GSS, no risk variants for that. Crohn's disease, 2 risk variants, but they are not marked as important, so I think we can ignore those. Riefenstein's, no risk variants for that. Parkinson's, no risk variants. Do we see any risk variants for any of this? I don't see any risk variants for any of this. For allergies, we see risk variants 3 out of 14, which is very typical, actually very low, so quite good here. So it looks quite good. Everything looks quite good. So the only thing that really stands out in this result is the risk score for AMD, age-related macular degeneration. Let's look that up and see what genotypes he has for that in the file. So he has a genotype for reduced risk of AMD. He has a genotype for 10 times increased risk of AMD. He has a genotype for 3 times increased risk of AMD. He has a genotype for 2 times increased risk of AMD. Okay, interesting. So definitely a lot of genotypes that greatly increase the risk of AMD, and because of that, the score is quite crazy. All right, let's go through the monogenic risk scores, and we'll be done there. So it looks like for warrior versus warrior, he's definitely more of a warrior, which is very typical for various European hunter-gatherers. I think out of the 10 samples I've looked at so far, I've only had 1 sample who was not a warrior, and even then, he wasn't a warrior, he was just intermediate. So warrior is definitely the most common phenotype for European hunter-gatherers. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what is the evolutionary or scientific advantage for European hunter-gatherers specifically compared to the rest of world's population to be warriors. But it seems that warrior is by far the most common phenotype for European hunter-gatherers. It looks like he is predisposed to having intermediate noradopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, so intermediate predisposition to such conditions as schizophrenia or bipolar. And it looks like he has a lower level of 5-HT and serotonin, so a higher predisposition to such conditions as anxiety or depression. It looks like he has no dwarfism, not dwarf or short, overly short. For results for mental health section in autism only, it looks like he has a intermediate predisposition to autism. Very interesting. For lactose persistence, it looks like he has higher or intermediate odds for lactose intolerance. Once again, he does not carry any variants for European lactose persistence. So, it is very interesting that out of these samples that I'm looking at, out of these Eastern hunter-gatherers, none of them carry variants for lactose persistence. And I'm not finding any samples. Like seriously, I'm not finding any samples until literally like Iron Age that would carry these variants for lactose persistence. It's just so bizarre, and somehow it just appeared out of nowhere, and it spread all over Europe, and now most Europeans carry them. It's so bizarre. Okay, for empathy gene, it looks like he's got predisposition to average or higher level of empathy based on his 3 SNPs. Very, very cool. For hemochromatosis, we already went over that. Diabetes, we already went over that. He's got lower odds for both. For Alzheimer's, he's got lower odds for Alzheimer's. For cardiovascular disease panel, he's got a predisposition to intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues. Pretty cool. Okay, for vitiligo panel, and this is something we can talk about. Actually, did I talk about the multiple sclerosis? Yes, multiple sclerosis. No risk variance for MS in the HLA gene, really good. So we will probably see good results in the HLA gene panel. And for vitiligo panel, we see one risk variant for vitiligo in the HLA gene here, but none here. So once again, looks like we see out of the 4 HLA variations, we only found one risk variant. So if we count that up, that's 1 out of 8 risk variants. It's definitely looking very, very good for the HLA gene panel. Only 1 out of 8 risk variants. It looks like he does not have micropenis here, no micropenis here either. So 2 variations for micropenis, no micropenis alleles. Mix of muscle types, like the more sprinter rather than endurance athlete, really good to see. And also not an Asian flusher, lower odds of alcoholism and normal risk of esophageal cancer, really good to see. Okay, he's not a carrier of any of the albinism mutations, and he is also not a carrier of variants for familiar Mediterranean fever. He does not have any variants for impaired folate metabolism in MTHFR. So from that, we can assume that the homocysteine panel is probably going to look good as well. So overall, it's just a very healthy result. There is not much to worry about. Alcoholism panel is looking good as well. There is really no health concerns that I can dig at here. There is nothing that stands out. Leukemia panel, no risk variance for leukemia here. There is a genotype that increases the odds for leukemia significantly, slightly, not significantly, but slightly increases the odds for leukemia, but that's not that big of a deal. For rare traits panel, let's see, what can we talk about here? Genotype that leads to increased odds for neural tube defects and spina bifida. Genotype that leads to high risk of glaucoma. But that's pretty much it. Okay, no risk variance for Canavan syndrome, HIV and AIDS panel, no protective variants from HIV, so he's not protected from HIV, but then again, most people don't have these protective variants. And for the HLA gene panel, looks like he's got lower odds of autoimmune disease. So as I was saying, the HLA gene is looking pretty good. MTRR gene panel looks like he's got 2 risk variants for disorders of intracellular colobid metabolism here, but no risk variants anywhere else. So it's 2 risk variants out of 6 in total. 2 out of 6 risk variants looks pretty good. And for the CBS gene panel, it looks like he has the highest impact SNP is here, and it leads to lower homocysteine levels. Also keep in mind that the variants in MTHFR also play a very big role for the homocysteine panel. So this plus the variants in MTHFR, they lead to overall him scoring lower or intermediate levels of homocysteine. So overall, the panel is looking very good. The panel is looking very, very good overall. Even though he does have some genotypes that lead to increased levels of homocysteine, like here, and actually these 3, all 3 of them lead to increased levels of homocysteine. But that is still, even though there's these 3 genotypes, they're still not enough to really change the tide of the panel. The panel is still overwhelmingly positive. Okay, for muscular dystrophy myopathies, he's got no risk variance for that, no risk variance for ADL. For color blindness panel, no risk variance for color blindness in OPN1SW. And for FTO gene panel, looks like he has a predisposition to lower odds of obesity. Very, very good. Based on these 4 SNPs, really, really good to see. Based on 1 SNP, he has average odds for syncope. And for the biotraits panel, let's see, what can we talk about here? He's got 1 copy of the hunter-gatherer CLTCL1 gene variant and 1 copy of the farmer variant, which leads to intermediate ability to process carbs and sugars, which is very ironic, I think, that he has 1 copy of the one copy of the farmer variant, because he is literally a hunter-gatherer. But keep in mind that this variation doesn't really have anything to do with like ethnicity. You can literally be a hunter-gatherer and have 2 copies of the farmer, quote-unquote farmer variant. They just named it this way because they figured it would be advantageous to have if you are a farmer, if you practice a farming type of a lifestyle. It doesn't really have ethnic connotations, right? It's just they just named it this way because they figured it would be more advantageous to certain groups of people. And Okay, let's see. For blood group panel, I'm just gonna skip over all of this because there's too much information and I don't really have a good way to condense all of this. And for blood group panel, it looks like he definitely has blood type O. 96% odds for blood type O, and pretty much below 5% odds for everything else. So we know for sure he has blood type O, very, very common blood type. Most people worldwide have blood type O, and that includes him. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this video, this breakdown of part 10, Eastern Hunter-Gatherer MN2003. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and check out the description where you can download the raw DNA file for this sample. Make sure you also check out the description where you can buy my trait predictor, the executable that I use to generate these reports. It is only $25 on my itch store. You can also buy a report for yourself for only $4. A report that looks sort of like this. It will probably look a little bit different because you will have more information in your raw DNA file than this. Typically, if you have my heritage or 23andMe or ancestry file, you will have a little bit more information in your raw DNA file than the stuff that you see here in these reports. But essentially, a report that looks like this you can purchase from me for only $4. If you want to purchase 2 reports, that's going to cost you actually $7. So there's a little bit of a price off for the second report. But anyway, the link to purchase that is also going to be in the description. And thanks for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and goodbye.